They said Filipinos don't speak real English until a Harvard professor admitted the truth. Now, a lot of people have sent this over to me, linked this over to me, and actually mentioned, hey, Vision, maybe you could actually give some examples because you have probably witnessed something like this. And honestly, I could, on top of the fact of listen to this story. People wanted me to listen to this story and check it out. So I'm excited to see it. You guys can come join me. Let's see this together.
Have you ever been told something so confidently, so repeatedly, that you almost believed it yourself? Until one moment shattered that illusion? For decades, a quiet insult has lingered in the air whenever the Philippines is mentioned in the context of language. They don't really speak English. Not the real English.
What does that even mean?
Those words have been whispered by foreigners, chuckled at in boardrooms, and even written in articles by so-called experts. It is not shouted, it is murmured, as if the world had agreed upon it long ago.
I don't think I've seen, actually, no. I might have seen an article actually saying something like that. This is like a while back, actually, like maybe 2 years ago. I won't be able to find it, but there was an article that definitely mentioned it. And it kind of was sad to see, right? There's always articles that can go under the rug that you guys might not see. And honestly, sometimes I might not either. So obviously with this story, it can definitely apply to a lot of different situations because this definitely does happen. Remember, articles can get published, very low rating, right? And a lot of people not pay attention to it, which is pretty good, especially if it's considering the fact that that article might be saying something stupid like that. So,
and yet, it cuts deep, like a blade hidden beneath politeness.
Yeah.
What if I told you that one of the most respected professors at Harvard University, yes, Harvard, the symbol of academic authority, once repeated this claim, not in malice, not in anger, but with the confidence of someone who believed he was stating fact. Imagine that. The Philippines, a nation with over 100 years of English tradition, dismissed in a single breath by a scholar who had never truly listened. And yet, here lies the micro-shock. That same professor, months later, found himself standing before a packed lecture hall, his voice trembling, his eyes lingering on a single sentence written on the screen. Filipinos speak English more fluently than most native speakers I have met. But before we reach that moment, before we hear those words that silenced an auditorium, we must go back, because every awakening begins with ignorance, every confession begins with denial. The story starts not in Manila, not in Harvard, but in a dimly lit conference room in Geneva, Switzerland. There, a group of international educators had gathered, each presenting their insights on global communication. At the center of it all was Professor Andrew Whitmore, a man in his late 50s, a scholar of linguistics, respected, admired, and often feared for his uncompromising critiques. To many, his word was law. That evening, over coffee and quiet laughter, someone asked him casually, "Professor, what do you make of English in the Philippines? They say it is everywhere there." He adjusted his glasses, leaned back, and with a faint smile replied, "It is everywhere, yes. But let us be honest, it is not real English.
That is the dumbest thing he's ever said, and I'm glad he learned. And even if this story may not have complete, like, oh, this is who he is, or not have a complete validation in that sense, I can even show you guys an example, right? This video I did a while back,
In
right?
1956, high school exchange students.
Yeah, man, I'm glad I changed my editing style from here. But with that being said, there was a whole video I actually saw from 1956. And this is so weird. It's like me reacting to me reacting. That's crazy. But just real quick, before we get back to that story, I wanted to show you guys this, right? This has to be the dumbest thing I've heard from a Harvard professor, because look at 1956, Philippines kid, bro. I don't know how old he is in here, right? I think I said it in the beginning, right? He might be, what, 14? I don't even know.
Sentencing.
Listen to him speak.
They're being persons, but on the basis of race, creed, economic status, that is prejudice.
Okay,
Well,
this kid already.
Whether you have any prejudices?
Well, I guess so, Mrs. Waller. And being brutally frank, I'm prejudiced against Japanese. Well, not to the extent that I hate them. No, not that way. But I got this, well, as a result of World War II. Because
And you know what? I love the way he speaks. And obviously, if you guys want to watch this video, check it out. It's literally the Filipino boy shows brilliant insight in 1956 students debate. I posted this, and it was great. It was an awesome video. I loved every minute of it. And I think that, let me get back to this. I think that it really shows you that even if this story that you guys link over, because keep in mind, I enjoy these stories purely because there is a lot of genuineness within them, but some of the stories may not be completely accurate, right? And that is to just say that there is people out there who truly believe that. There's people out there who genuinely believe that, hey, Filipinos don't speak real English, or any other country for that matter, right? But Filipinos at most is one of the best, most fluent English speaking I've ever seen. And that kid is a beautiful example. Since 1956, there's a kid speaking English in a debate better than most individuals have spoken it. And it's kind of scary to see that because it shows you that so much has changed, and sometimes people lose fact in this kind of like endeavor we call life. Like, you just be moving on, and you forget that the Philippines is one of the best in English speaking. And I've been in a debate that he's known as one of the most brilliant, right, in 1956. So let's get back to the story. But yeah, it really emphasizes that.
It is a form, a version, but not the kind you would expect at Harvard. There was laughter around the table. Some nodded. Others stayed silent.
Back to that video, like I said.
And somewhere across the ocean, an entire nation remained unaware of the insult tossed so effortlessly against it. But words have strange journeys. They travel, they echo, they find their way into unexpected corners. And that single remark, dismissive, almost careless, would return to him in a way he never expected. A few months later, Professor Whitmore accepted an invitation to visit the Philippines. He had been asked to speak at a forum on global education, to share his expertise with Filipino teachers and policymakers. He arrived with the arrogance of a man who believed he was stepping into a land eager to learn from him, not realizing that it was he who would be taught. The first moment that struck him happened not in a conference, not in a lecture hall, but in the back of a taxi. His driver, a middle-aged man with tired eyes but a polite smile, struck up a conversation. "Sir, welcome to Manila." "First time here?" The professor nodded, half distracted, until he realized something peculiar. The driver's English, fluid, precise, and laced with gentle humor, was as clear as any he had heard in London or Boston. He brushed it aside. Coincidence, he told himself. One man does not define a nation. But then, at the hotel reception, the staff switched effortlessly between English, Tagalog, and even Japanese, as they handled guests with grace. At dinner, a young waiter...
Of course. I mean, think about it. Where they are between the amount of nations that they're kind of surrounded by, they are enforced, especially with, and I know that this may not seem like it has direct correlation, but being in the ring of fire and having all of these typhoons consistently hit you, and don't worry, I'm getting to a point, in my opinion, how I see that and perceive that, right, above the fact that they are very enduring, right, of any situation. They keep moving forward. They try to smile and make sure, because they already live every day with all these typhoons hitting, all these natural disasters, because they're in the ring of fire. They already live with that idea of, let me be grateful every day because I don't know if this might be my last, with the typhoons hitting, with all these things hitting, right? And so with that being said, right, this whole situation applies as well to learning. You don't know if this might be your last day, so I want to learn. I want to know. I want to be able to learn Japanese. I want to be able to learn English and Tagalog. And even though it is enforced in school, I think that enforcement is because maybe of that, right? It's this consistent wanting to grow. You guys should check out the 25 mind-blowing facts that I learned about the Philippines. That shows you so many beautiful things about the Philippines and how they endured so much in growing and why it's so beautiful, right? You should check that out. It's on my channel, but that applies to what I'm saying too. And it's such a beautiful thing to understand that. And it's funny enough, even if this story may not be completely true, this story, I still think, even if it is, fake or whatever, I think that it still holds value in the sense that there is probably people who walk around assuming this, right? Assuming this ideology. And this could be a good story to show you something, to give you a reason to believe something different, a different perspective on how Filipinos really are, because people do have that very narrow tunnel vision view on something and they accept it as that. They don't look at the broad view of, wait, this could offer more opportunities. They actually are more than just what people say they are.
Recommended dishes with words so carefully chosen, it felt like he had been trained in diplomacy. And for the first time in a long while, Professor Whitmore fell silent. Not convinced, not yet, but unsettled. That night, as he stood on his hotel balcony overlooking the Manila skyline, the city lights flickering like restless fireflies, he whispered to himself, "Could I have been wrong?" Little did he know, this question was only the beginning. Because in the days that followed, he would be confronted with moments that not only challenged his assumptions, but shattered them completely, until the man who once dismissed Filipino English as inferior would stand before the world and admit the truth that had been hidden too long. When Professor Andrew Whitmore woke up the next morning, the humid Manila air carried with it a sense of restlessness. He had spent his life dissecting language, reducing it to rules, syntax, and structure. But here, in the Philippines, something unsettled him. It wasn't just the fluency he had noticed in the taxi driver or the polished grace of the hotel staff. It was something deeper, something harder to explain. The conference was 2 days away, and so he had time to explore. His hosts encouraged him to see the city for himself, to walk its streets and feel its rhythm.
Yeah, try that, bro. I did it.
At first, he resisted. He was a man of books, not sidewalks, but curiosity tugged at him. So he set out, notebook in hand, expecting nothing more than an ordinary walk.
And that's actually funny. He's a man of books, but not a man of sidewalks. First of all, if you read enough books, you'd understand that sidewalks can help you, aka your health. So start walking, buddy. Like, that's another thing. It's like, hey, man, I'm a book guy. I'm a this guy. Brother, whatever you're doing, if you're smart enough, knowledgeable enough, you understand that walking is pretty good for you. It's actually one of the healthiest things you can do, even mentally and physically. It's incredible for your health. So I'm a book guy. Start walking. If you read enough books, you know you got to start walking.
Instead, he stumbled into 3 moments that would begin to erode the certainty he once held. The first came at a small cafe near Intramuros, the historic heart of Manila.
Love that place.
He ordered a coffee, simple enough, and sat by the window as morning light poured in. At the next table, 3 students were huddled together, their laptops open, papers scattered across the wood. He tried not to eavesdrop, but their voices carried. They were debating, fluently, passionately, in English, the nuances of a political theory he had lectured on at Harvard only months earlier. Their words were precise, their logic sharp, their vocabulary rich. One girl even quoted a philosopher in French before translating it smoothly into English for her friends.
Now listen, I have never heard that happen before in a restaurant when I was in the Philippines, but I did hear not necessarily a debate, but a perfectly well-orchestrated conversation that sometimes you wouldn't even hear in other countries. And the Philippines was just fluently doing that in English, right? And you would hear it. It's almost like you're not even in the Philippines sometimes. And that's not a bad thing, right? I'm not saying that like, hey, them speaking is taken away from it. No, the Philippines will always be the Philippines, unique and beautiful. But it's crazy to hear how well they can speak it, because even in cafes when I was there with my friends, I would just hear them speak English like it's nothing, like it's not something they learned, like it's something they just are able to do. You know what I mean? It's not one of those things, you know, when you hear someone speak English and it sounds like they learned it, even though I know before everyone tells me, hey, they had to learn it, like Tagalog or English may be their first. I know that. I know they have to learn it, but it's like they spoke it as if they were knowing of it, period, not even learning it. And they spoke it so well. And it was insane, right? Because they would go to Tagalog. They would switch between. And to me, it's one of the coolest things because it shows you that it's not just about learning the language for them. It's more so because they probably want to be able to share conversations more effortlessly with each other through that language, because English is one of the most known speaking languages, I assume. And I think that a lot of places being able to speak English will allow you to trade values, to speak about so many different things. So them learning it and the way they speak it just feels like they have a purpose for learning it, right? More so. And it just sounds like it just comes naturally. So I've heard it firsthand.
He lowered his pen. These were not just students speaking functional English. These were minds wielding the language as a tool, as an instrument of thought. They reminded him of his brightest graduate students back in Cambridge. And yet they were here, in Manila, speaking with confidence and depth. The second moment happened in the most unexpected place, a marketplace. He wandered into the chaos of Divisoria, where stalls overflowed with colors, fabrics, spices, and noise. At first, he felt overwhelmed, but soon he noticed something remarkable. Vendors juggling customers from Korea, China, the Middle East, and the West switched languages with ease, English being the bridge that connected them all.
Yeah, I've seen that.
One young woman, no older than 20, spoke to a Japanese buyer in halting Japanese, then turned to a group of Europeans and explained prices in fluent English, her tone respectful yet assertive. The professor lingered near her stall, pretending to browse, listening carefully. There was no hesitation.
See, now that sounds realistic in the story, right? Because everyone would do that. That sounds genuinely so realistic because it's like you would linger by trying to listen, you know what I mean? Like, hey, I'm just going to pretend to look for them just so I could hear. Did she really just say that? Did she really just...
No awkward pause as she moved between tongues. He had studied bilingualism for decades, but here it was in practice, raw and alive.
Crazy.
This was not broken English. This was mastery in motion, shaped not in classrooms but in the crucible of survival and connection.
Yep.
The third moment struck him like a silent blow. It was evening, and he found himself in a modest chapel tucked between tall buildings. He had been drawn in by the sound of singing, soft yet powerful. Inside, a small congregation was reciting prayers in English, their voices rising in unison. There was no stumbling, no searching for words.
Don't even get me started on Filipino singing English songs. That's not even like, no one can doubt that. Like, story or not, you need to understand no one can doubt that. The way that they sing in English, it's like they are not even Filipino anymore. They genuinely became the English singer themselves. That's the craziest part. Look at my reaction on my channel to Elvis, the Filipino Elvis. Bro, does he sound like Filipino to you? Does he have a little bit of that Tagalog accent? No, zero. It's gone. It disappears. Because again, this passionate style that they have, and this applies to English too. Sometimes you can't even tell they're Filipino sometimes when they speak English. And that definitely 100,000,000% applies to music too. The way that they can transform is unbelievable. It's unbelievable.
The language flowed seamlessly, as if it belonged not to another nation, but to their very soul.
Bro, that's what I'm saying.
What startled him most was not the fluency, but the reverence. These were not rehearsed lines, not foreign phrases forced into mouths that did not own them.
Yeah.
These were words spoken with devotion, faith wrapped in English syllables, transformed into something uniquely Filipino. He closed his eyes, listening, and for the first time in years, he felt something unfamiliar.
Being wrong?
A lump rising in his throat, an ache in his chest. As he walked back to his hotel that night, the city's noise faded into a quiet hum inside his mind. 3 moments, students debating, vendors negotiating, worshippers praying, echoed louder than any lecture he had given. Then a group performed a debate, tackling a political issue with sharp arguments and clever rebuttals.
I actually showed a video of something like this
The professor
happening.
sat frozen. It was not just their fluency. It was the way they owned the language, bending it to their thoughts, their humor, their convictions. It was no longer the English of Cambridge or Boston. It was Filipino English, alive, expressive, unafraid. But it was the final moment that broke him. A young girl, no older than 12, stepped forward with a worn notebook in her hands. Her uniform was slightly faded, her shoes scuffed, but her eyes shone. She began to read an essay she had written, titled My Voice Matters. Her English was simple, not dressed in complicated words, but every sentence carried weight. She wrote about her father, a construction worker abroad, who called home every Sunday. She wrote about her mother, who worked late shifts but still prayed with her every night. And she wrote about her dream of becoming a lawyer, so that when people say Filipinos do not speak real English, I can stand and speak for my people. Her voice trembled on that last line. And then she looked directly at him, straight into his eyes, not with anger, not with defiance, but with a quiet plea for recognition. Something inside him shattered. For years he had worn the armor of academia, convinced that authority meant truth. But in that moment, standing before a 12-year-old girl in a crowded classroom in Manila, he realized how small his authority was compared to the weight of lived experience.
Yep.
He rose to his feet, unable to stay seated. The students stared at him, confused. His throat tightened, and before he could stop himself, his eyes blurred with tears. It had been decades since he had cried in public, but now the walls collapsed. He cleared his throat, his voice breaking. I must tell you something, he said, looking at the girl, then at the class. All my life, I believed I understood English better than anyone. I thought it belonged to the West, to Harvard, to Cambridge. But today you have shown me that English belongs to those who use it to give meaning, to give hope, to give truth. And no one does that more beautifully than you.
Wow.
The room fell utterly silent. The students stared, wide-eyed, as if trying to understand the weight of his confession. Then, slowly, the teacher at the back began to clap. One by one, the students followed, until the small classroom erupted in applause that was louder, fuller, and more honest than anything he had ever heard in a grand auditorium. For the first time in his life, Professor Andrew Whitmore felt small.
Wow.
But it was not the smallness of humiliation. It was the smallness of humility. And in that humility, he felt free. That night, when he returned to his hotel, he opened his laptop. He deleted the draft of his upcoming lecture. Instead, he began to write a new one that would change not only his reputation, but the way the world saw the Philippines.
That is incredible. And I won't lie, man. This story definitely gives me chills in a sense that a lot of people do need to understand that the Philippines is a lot more than what they perceive as just, oh, okay, they just learn a little English. It's more than that, because the way that they handle it, the way that they've been through so many things, I think shapes so much more in their future. It's actually much more important than people think too. Some people, I feel, they can literally have one of the most awe-inspiring English, but with the Philippines, they take it to another level in the sense that they have a purpose with it, right? And I think that that's what's important. Is a lot of people misunderstand that fact, is that they speak it in a way that I feel is important. And they do it in such a way that they want to be able to help. That's why they learn it, more than just being able to just know it, right? And I think that's really crucial.
Because he knew what he had to do. The world had laughed too long, doubted too long, dismissed too long. Now it was time to tell the truth. And he, of all people, would be the one to say it. Months later, the grand lecture hall at Harvard University filled with scholars, students, journalists, and diplomats. The banners of the prestigious institution hung proudly on the walls, their deep crimson shimmering under the golden lights. At the center stood Professor Andrew Whitmore, his hair grayer, his shoulders heavier, but his eyes carrying a clarity no one had seen before. This was no ordinary lecture. Word had spread quickly that the renowned linguist was going to address his controversial views on English in Asia. Some came expecting a defense. Others anticipated another dismissal. Few expected what was about to happen.
Yeah, because he did it before.
He began with a pause, letting the silence wash over the hall. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said slowly, his voice steady, yet weighted with emotion. "For most of my career, I taught that English was the property of the West, that it belonged to those born into it, raised in it, shaped by it. And among my careless words, I once said that in the Philippines, people do not speak real English." There was a stir in the room, whispers moving like waves. He did not flinch. Instead, he leaned forward, his eyes scanning the crowd. "I stand before you today to tell you I was wrong." The words landed like thunder. The room froze, as if the air itself had thickened. He continued. "In Manila, I met children who debate Shakespeare with eloquence, vendors who bridge cultures with words, worshippers who pray in English with a reverence that humbled me. I met teachers who carry the language not as a foreign burden, but as a gift.
Exactly.
And students who speak it with a conviction that I have rarely heard in Cambridge or Boston. I saw not imitation, but authenticity.
That's what I was trying to say too.
Brokenness, but brilliance." His voice began to tremble, but he pressed on. "English does not belong to Harvard. It does not belong to London or New York or Sydney. English belongs to those who use it to tell their truth. And in the Philippines, I found English more alive, more resilient, more beautiful than I ever imagined." The audience sat in stunned silence. Some scribbled furiously in their notebooks. Others simply stared. He let the words linger, then added, almost in a whisper, "If you wish to hear the future of English, do not only come to Harvard. Go to Manila. Go to Cebu. Go to Davao. There you will find English not as a borrowed tongue, but as a living voice of a people who have claimed it as their own." For a moment, no one moved. Then the applause began, hesitant at first, then swelling until the entire hall thundered with it. Professors stood. Students cheered. Journalists raised their cameras as flashes lit up the room. Yet, in the middle of it all, Professor Whitmore closed his eyes, hearing not the applause of Harvard, but the voices of those Filipino students. That young girl with the scuffed shoes declaring that her voice mattered. Later, the news spread across the globe. Headlines blared. Harvard professor admits Filipinos speak world-class English. Opinion pieces emerged, celebrating, debating, dissecting. But in the Philippines, the reaction was different. Teachers smiled through tears. Parents shared the story with pride.
Wow.
Students whispered to one another in classrooms, "Did you hear what the professor said about us?" For once, the narrative was not about doubt, not about condescension. It was about recognition, about dignity. And perhaps the most important change was not in Harvard, not in the newspapers, but in the quiet confidence of Filipinos themselves.
And it is important.
Because when the world had questioned them, when experts had dismissed them, they had continued to speak, to write, to pray, to dream, in English, yes, but also in their own indomitable spirit. And now, finally, the world was listening. Professor Whitmore would go on to write a book about his transformation, but the moment that mattered most was not bound in pages. It was that single confession, spoken in a trembling voice before the world's most elite institution. I was wrong. The Filipinos speak real English, perhaps even truer than mine. And as the story traveled, it became more than an academic admission. It became a symbol, a reminder that truth, no matter how long denied, has a way of rising.
Yeah.
For the people of the Philippines, it was more than vindication. It was a mirror reflecting what they had always known, that their voice mattered, that their words carried power, that their English was not less, but more.
That was an absolutely beautiful video. In the sense that, story or not, the reality is that a lot of Filipinos do need to understand that, because all the time, man, I mentioned, even with my friend, and my friend still brings it up, that time in the Philippines was such an exceptional time because of the people, the way that, of course, you know, subtly, they treated English in a way of respect, in a way of trying to speak to you, really you, not just baseline, hey, how are you doing? Like, really, like, hey, like, are you okay? Or do you need real help? And there's a lot of that there, man. And I really love it. And honestly, I appreciate you guys for linking this over. And I'm glad I could maybe show a couple of examples here, especially with that video I reacted to from 1956, to kind of add some substance to this. So I just want to say thank you guys for linking this over. I love you guys. Till next time, peace.
How good you been living? Wait, how good you been living? I've been living too good for you. I've been living too. Did what I did and I do it again. Every move that I make, I ain't feeling repent. Nobody believes to believe it's a friend, and you question your moves like you really won't end.